This is the story of a game that should never have existed. Now, you might have seen this screenshot floating around the internet as the face of PC-98 pixel art, but this is the legendary hentai game Virgin Angel. So, as a huge fan of both cyberpunk and PC-98 visual novels, I naturally asked, okay, but what is Virgin Angel, and found nothing. Not as in, like, it's lost media. I did read it, though as far as I'm aware, I'm the only English speaker who has, but as in, like, it almost might as well be lost media because besides the game itself, I found absolutely no information about the creation of this game on the internet whatsoever. No one, English or Japanese, knows anything about the most famous game on the PC-98. Like, literally, the only information available about it is the developer's name, which isn't even a real company. The only thing we actually know is that it did exist. Well, at least until now. You're welcome. But before I get too deep into this, you're probably wondering, okay, but is this a good game? Can you tell me what it's about? And boy, I thought you'd never ask, because this is absolutely insane. Tokyo, Japan, 2008. The city is racked with societal problems, with violent gangs and terrorist groups growing year over year. With the police deep in the pockets of criminal organizations, the people begin channeling their despair into an ever-growing outlet for all of their anxieties, known as the free sex zones. People who frequent these zones have their bodies altered with illegal surgeries and so-called body drugs, their testicles, ovaries, and organs being altered to have all of their orifices able to release cum that drugs any partner they come into contact with. These sex drugs are the cause of a sudden increase in kidnapping and human trafficking incidents, with brainwashed victims being sold for high prices on the black market as sex slaves. In order to combat the growing organized crime and protect the citizens of Tokyo, the government has set up a small, elite, and independent task force called the Metropolitan Public Safety Office, the Shutokoan Kyoku, or TOA for short. Okay, so the reason I know I'm the only person who's read it is because the only information I could find about the game itself, besides the odd lewd screenshot, is a short synopsis written by someone who was either illiterate or never even made it past the title screen because they're somehow not aware that the main character, you know, the hot babe who became the face of the entire PC-98 system in the West, is actually a dude. So the best way I can describe the vibe of this story is by telling you about him, because he's, how do I put this? I'm not really sure, because Japanese is not my native language, so I could be like way off base here, but it feels like the character, Murakumo, is written to sound what a straight Japanese man in the 90s thinks a flamboyantly gay person would sound like. And you might be like, wait, that's surprisingly progressive. Like, yeah, let me stop you right there, Hassan. Okay, so in the first few minutes of the game, the chief of Toan, again, that's the Metropolitan Public Safety Office, tells him to stop taking female hormones. And he's like, how dare you? This is my identity. I'm not gay though, don't worry, wink. No, that's not the weird part, let me continue. Later, the new recruit, Yuki, asks him if he's a woman, and he's like, okay. So he's like, nah. It's just female hormones. A girl I was banging before wanted to know what it feels like to be fucked by another woman, so I just started taking them. There's no real deep meaning behind it. You know, suddenly started a sex change and got large honking titties on a whim. It's not that deep, bro. And so this is where you start to realize that Murakumo is your classic sex pest, only he has tits and talks kind of gay. So the optimistic interpretation of this idea is in direct opposition to someone like Rance or Koji. This is the other way of making a sex pest character kind of excusable by just making them a woman, because that's just inherently more acceptable. For all 2 girls watching, shut the fuck up, mom, you know it's true. But the pessimistic interpretation of Murakumo is that, given the content of this game, there's a pretty non-zero chance the author based his character off of 90s trans porn. Now again, I don't know, because I can only get off to 2D women, so I've never seen any, but out of the 2 interpretations, I'm kind of leaning towards this one. Anyway, before we get so far into this game that you'll need to take a quick break to stop and light a cigarette, let's actually take a sec to talk a bit more about who made this game. First things first, I think we need to establish why the fuck we should at all care about this random PC-98 visual novel that just happened to go viral on Tumblr one day. Because when I tried to find out exactly what this is and who made it, well, see, that's just it. You might think, okay, this is easily the best looking game on the PC-98 and one of the better sounding ones too, so it must have come from one of the big development studios of the era like Elf or Leaf, and if you thought that, you'd, here's the thing. I don't know. No, I mean, I looked into it and I do know, but what I found doesn't make any fucking sense. Okay, so the developer, Crystalsoft, this was their second and final game, meaning they put all of their efforts into this one high-budget production which didn't sell, causing the studio to go bankrupt and close, and they never got a chance to make another game together. Or, at least, that's what I thought, until I saw Virgin Angel's entry on the website EroGamescape, which labeled it as a doujin, or an indie game, which led me down this insane fever dream of a YouTube video. Like, hold up a minute. You don't just have one of the most iconic, highly produced games of an entire era just materialize out of thin air. I don't give a shit who you are. This was not a doujin work. So, naturally, I bought a copy of the game to find out. No, sorry. That's a lie. That's like almost impossible to find and like really expensive. But I did buy a copy of the art book that came with the game, hoping it would clear up a bit of this mystery, and short version, kind of, but not really. Long version, it didn't, but also, dude, what the fuck? Virgin Angel was produced by Crystalsoft, which included director and producer Suzuki Kenichi, scriptwriter Izuna Makoto, character designer Miyamoto Seijo, character designer / concept artist Nakamura Nishiki, composer Shibata Sentaro Sen, and count 'em, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 other artists and editors between the game and art book. What the fuck? You know how many artists Yuno had? The universally acclaimed #1 best and most successful PC-98 game ever? 8! This had more artists working on it than the most high-budget, most successful visual novel on the entire goddamn system. Who the fuck are these people, and how was this much effort put into this game without anyone noticing? How is this considered a doujin? Actually, let's take a step back and clarify how popular this game actually is and was. While this somehow miraculously gained a weird amount of notoriety in the West among people who have literally never read a single line from it, I found no discussion about this game in Japanese. None. Not on 5chan, not on Nico Nico, nowhere. I did find a strategy guide written in Chinese, probably by a Taiwanese person only half reading this thing with kanji, but like there's literally more posted about this in both Chinese and English than its original native language. Now, this is not to say that none ever happened. It did rank number 23 best PC-98 game of all time by the PC-98 LM Club website's user base, but this is such a small group of people that rank 23 is literally tied with 20 other games alongside Dokyusei, and 11th through 22nd is another 12-way tie, so I have a strong suspicion they didn't even manage to survey 5 people for this. Perhaps more telling is I couldn't find a single copy of this game being sold anywhere. Not that it's never sold, there are copies out there, but it's hard to tell because this game is impossibly difficult to get your hands on.
I mean, I'm not even sure who was the first one to actually find and share this game. I'm willing to bet that this game is just so obscure that it was literally almost unknown until Western archivists trying to preserve every obscure PC-98 title they could get their hands on, put it up on the internet among like 100 other titles where it was inevitably shared because of the exact reason you're watching this video now. So basically, the fact that literally almost no one has ever interacted with this game in its native language is several points towards this being a doujin. Although, perhaps part of its anonymity in Japanese is the hilariously ironic fact that Crystalsoft shares its name with a different PC-98 developer also specializing in eroge, a far more successful company called Crystalsoft with an X. Honestly, the more I look into this, the less surprised I am that no one's heard of Virgin Angel. But also, okay, let's just back up a second. It's still just really hard to believe that this game is anything even remotely indie. I mean, if we crack open the art book, we realize that the game came with a quality feedback survey, an official fan club invitation, and a 24-hour customer support hotline. Sorry, but what the fuck? So, naturally, my first impression of this was, okay, Edogamescape is just wrong. Obviously, all this capitalistic bullshit made it a clear open and shut case of no, obviously it's not a doujin like lol, LMAO, raffle even. But then I turned to the back of the art book and found a message from the art book editor answering literally the very question I am currently asking. How? I swear to God, we're living in a fucking simulation, dude. So let me just read what this letter says for you. After playing this, you might be wondering, is this really a doujin game? Just comparing the size of Virgin Angel to commercially available games, you'd call it a doujin, but with the amount of quality packed in, you'd probably think it'd pass as a retail product, right? Because it was created with care to give this exact impression to the reader. For example, all of the characters are well fleshed out and super erotic, although more sophisticated readers might think it's just porn, lol. But also, even the CGs are such high quality professional work that I have to give it my stamp of approval, lol. And no matter what anyone says, I love Yuki-chan. Okay, so this answered literally none of the questions I had, or even the one you fucking said you were answering, Ms. Okazaki now. Ah, I see. You might naturally be confused on whether or not this is really a doujin game. No, it is. We just really put a lot of work into it. No, we're not gonna tell you anything about any of the people involved in this project. Sure, why not? Fuck you too. I swear to God, she even included an anecdote about the first time she met the game's author like he's some sort of really famous and successful dev. Who the fuck is this? I literally know more about you, dude. Who wrote this game? Well, if I couldn't find any information about the game, and Okazaki-san here refused to say anything of substance, there is one thing I could do. I mean, I literally have a list of all of the people who made the game. All I have to do is contact one of them, right? Well, here's the thing. I couldn't find the director anywhere. As far as I can tell, this might as well have been a pen name. The composer, on the other hand, has quite a career, but I couldn't find any way to contact him. As for the character designer, he is a moderately successful edo manga artist and does still have a website where he's helpfully listed all of his work, including this one, but he literally wrote that he doesn't really remember anything about it. I mean, sure, it was a long time ago, but is it not weird that he specifically wrote this about the most mysterious doujin game ever made? I swear to God, it's like this game was made by actual ghosts. I sent a message to him along with my email address, as well as to the doujin publisher behind the dude who made the CGs, but if I know anything about interacting with Japanese companies, so until the art director answers this, if he does at all, I'm really not exactly sure where to go from here. In the meantime though, let's take a look at the actual game itself, because you can probably tell from that insane fever dream of an intro that this game is something else. Something being the key operative word in this sentence, but okay, here's the short version. So, the game starts with Murakumo on a typical night going on patrol before looking for a hookup at the local drag bar, you know, as you do, before being sent on a new and murder case, possibly by a combat doll, possibly as an escaped call girl from the free sex zones. Okay, listen, I'm just gonna be saying a bunch of words, and you're just gonna have to trust me when I tell you it'll start making sense in a second. Think of this as like Clockwork Orange if it were anime cyberpunk and also pornography, and also it only kind of made sense. Anyway, with no luck on his visit to the drag bar, he stumbles into the office, late as usual, to meet the new recruit, Yuki, and literally the second thing he says to her is ask her out on a date, and she politely refuses because she heard he's some kind of sex pest, which Anyway, after explaining his huge titties to the nice lady, we get introduced to the Dr. Shinobu, who gets on top of him and asks if he's cheating on her with that new girl, Yuki, before being interrupted and telling him that they've found the victim was under the influence of an expensive designer body drug called
Virgin Angel.
Trades for a high price in the slave market. We then learn that the victim was a hospital nurse kidnapped and beat to death in the streets after work, and the perpetrator was a former soldier who shot and killed police 3 months ago after her activities in some anti-Ouroboros terrorist assassination group. The Ouroboros Project, which is a giant space prison the government is building for terrorists and political criminals, is okay. Yes, this is one of those B-movie plots that has way too much going on and uses a lot of big words to make it sound more intelligent than it actually is, but we did say this is basically level 2 James Bond. Anyway, we go to question the head of the hospital the victim worked at, Dr. Kusanagi, along with his personal secretary, Reiko, who has an unbelievably ridiculous figure that makes Murakumo want to sleep with her almost immediately. Of course, the good doctor conveniently remembers very little about the nurse who suddenly quit her job 2 months ago. Look, here, ask her coworker Mommy, who keeps looking over at Reiko for absolutely zero reason. By the way, a lot of famous people attend this hospital, so please stop loitering around here. Thank you! And they leave after Murakumo slips Mommy his business card. Coming back later after a bunch of bullshit, Mommy tells us that the victim oddly quit just before graduating to become a full-time nurse, saying she saw something crazy around the abandoned hospital wing and was gonna talk to her more, but disappeared and was never heard from again. So, Murakumo and Yuki leave to investigate the hospital wing and are, surprise, stopped by Reiko, who shows up with 3 extremely huge buff combat dolls doing steroids up to their brains. They fight, and Murakumo gets tossed around before shooting the dude's hand off, getting away, but girl, this is not over. You know, playing through all of this, I have absolutely no doubt this was inspired by the anime City Hunter. If you've never seen it, imagine James Bond, but set in 80s Japan, and the character is like a massive sex pest. Like, more than normal. Like, I tried watching it and couldn't get past the 3rd episode because literally, and I swear to God I'm not exaggerating here, literally half of every episode was just him being a sex pest. But the new Netflix movie that came out last year was exactly what I thought City Hunter was going to be before watching it, and it's absolutely amazing and you should go watch it. So, this game feels like that, but with slightly more Futanari lore. Speaking of which, on the way back to headquarters, they stop at the park and we learn about the characters' pasts. Murakumo was born in the slums, growing up in street gangs, with violence and death a part of his everyday life. Eventually, he killed a police officer when he was 18 and finally tried as an adult, was given a life sentence in prison. That is, until Chief Sasami traded him his life sentence for 67,500 hours in service for the Metropolitan Public Safety Office, which is about 15 years of service. If you do the math, you'll find a bit of an alarming statistic on Japanese work-life balance in the 90s, and this sounds like an easy bargain until you realize that a Toan officer only has a 60% chance of surviving a single year of service, meaning that it's a far harder punishment than a life behind bars. But this would at the very least give him some semblance of a normal existence, as well as a chance to atone for his sins, and since having made that deal, he's grown from violence being an everyday occurrence to realizing how fucked up a world where the poor kill the poor to survive must be. Yuki, too, grew up in the slums with an older sister she admired. One day, they were attacked by a dealer, and she was taken away protecting Yuki before being sold as a sex slave after being changed by body drugs and died last year, causing Yuki to join Toan and later have hot Futanari sex in the back of some inexplicable rural cabin in the middle of neo-cyberpunk Tokyo. Anyway, they come back to the office and learn that the victim was 100% kidnapped from there by people trying to stop the Ouroboros Project. Remember, that's the giant space jail for terrorists, and then she was cremated. Suspiciously, they look more into the combat doll creation process and realize that while a brain transplant is possible if it's intact, it will be rejected by the body unless you hold it back temporarily with certain drugs. Unless the brain can learn to disperse stress on its own, in which case it can hold out for several months, which you can do if the brain learns to release sex hormones by itself, and they look into the trade of Virgin Angel and the hospital, where the abandoned wing has been using a suspicious amount of electricity. So, while this is a mostly linear visual novel, here's where we get to one of two actual decisions, where we go to the armory and outfit Murakumo with the correct gear. You can choose between bulletproof armor, hand-to-hand armor, laser-resistant armor, and freeze-resistant armor, as well as the corresponding bullet type, except he just gives up and takes all of those. Murakumo sets off alone, but Yuki follows him anyway, and you can either let her come or futilely try to stop her. They find a secret lab covered in Virgin Angel, as well as tapes of new combat dolls being broken in, and no matter what choice you selected earlier, you tell Yuki to head back as you take on the dangerous work, and immediately hear a shriek as she's caught by Hideko, who you now realize is not only a combat doll, but in fact, the very victim you were looking for. If you weren't paying attention in the previous fight scene with Hideko and chose anything but hand-to-hand armor, you wake up to Yuki having been given a robot penis and forced to indoctrinate you into a combat doll. Otherwise, you now get to choose your selected bullets as you wander off in search of Yuki, and if you've again been paying attention, you'll realize that the hard plastic polymer of the combat doll is weak to cold and go with the freeze bullets, upon which you get into another fight with Reiko and Dr. Kusanagi, who shoots you with a needle gun, paralyzing you while going on an insane villain rant saying he has 3 more combat dolls, and this won't affect his plan to attack the Ouroboros conference in the slightest. Until, of course, you somehow summon the power to pull the trigger, grazing his face and passing out just as Sasame comes in with an army of police as he put a tracker on you and predicted you would ignore orders and come here, and Murakumo breaks his contract and leaves, deciding to live out his life as a fugitive from the law in a rural cabin in Hokkaido with Yuki rather than risking his life day in and day out as a Toan officer. So, happy ending? So, that's the Yuki route. Murakumo, hardened police officer and fetishized lesbian sex past, lives life on the edge, expecting to die at any moment until he finds a purpose to actually live for and decides to spend the rest of his days on the run from the law. So, that's great and all, but personally, the hot doctor type is more my speed, so let's go back and try to get her route. So, we restart from the beginning and pick all the anti-Yuki choices and get the same route. Wait a second. Okay, so for some reason, this is way more difficult than it sounds because the game apparently really wants you to pick the Yuki route. To avoid it, you have to pick literally every single non-Yuki option, but once you do, yeah, here's where I realized this game really is a doujin work because it's exactly the same ending, only you don't quit the Toan force and marry Yuki, you just kind of apologize for getting her fucked up to solve a case. Oops. So this, I'm gonna be honest with you, I went into this video thinking this game is seriously underappreciated. I mean, sure, it's basically the most well-known PC-98 game in the West, but not because anyone's actually played it, because of this screenshot right here. And so, like, it felt like the creators wished upon a monkey's paw, that it finally became recognized for its sheer artistry, for the amount of talent and hard work that went into the game, but in literally the most surface level way possible. Like, only for the main character, and only on literally the first actual screen of the game. Here was this epic adventure that everyone saw and lauded, yet no one actually took the time to play. But now, having played it, I have almost the opposite feeling because it actually feels severely unfinished. Like, it's set what is, unironically, despite all the Futonari porn, one of the better cyberpunk settings I've read, but with the corrupt government building a space prison for criminals, both domestic and political. Like, it felt like an intro to an epic adventure where you, specialized police officer seeking redemption from a life of crime, investigate what at first glance appears to be another gang-related crime, the murder of an ordinary woman forced into the underworld of sex trafficking and cutting-edge illegal drugs, only to uncover a greater conspiracy of a doctor turning victims into undead robot assassins, which is all part of a greater conspiracy against the government and their dystopian space prison, where, as the grand plot unfolds, it ends in some epic space showdown on a giant space prison where you heroically make amends for any and all of your past wrongdoings in an epic grand finale where you throw down your life in one final act of redemption. Where, despite all this, the ending is bittersweet as along the way you've come to realize both the evil of a prison for political rivals, but also that keeping the status quo is the only real path forward for the oppressive society you were born into. But instead, it just kind of ends after unveiling this first big branch of the plot, which felt like the anticlimactic bad ending where you decide to just cut your losses and run, leaving the future in a bittersweet uncertainty by abandoning the world for the happiness of a single person. To compare this to a proper epic visual novel, this felt like the Ruga ending. No, I will never shut up about Steins Gate, you must be new here. So when I realized this is the true ending, it felt like the game just narratively blue-balled the shit out of me. Not actually blue-balled, mind you, I did factor this ending, but you know what I mean. I mean, I get that it's a doujin work, and that it was never meant to be a massive game, but one, the way it's written feels like it should have been larger, and that's just incredibly disappointing. Like, they could have written something smaller in scope, but simply chose not to, and I'm not sure I'd agree with that decision. And two, where the fuck is the Shinobu route? Like, the game starts with her shirt coming open when she suddenly gets on top of you. I mean, this is definitely the kind of thing that a game like this would use as a teaser, you know? Hey, look forward to an actual scene with her. Like, any kind. But this is just forgotten about, and we're left with a single linear route that makes up the entirety of the game. What I'm saying is I just wanted to see Murakumo fuck the doctor, and this game's length would be a lot more forgivable if someone would please draw me a doujin. All in all, while this took me quite a while to read on account of me not being Japanese and also constantly taking notes to write this video, it'd probably take the average Japanese person like an hour or two to play through this entire game. This feels like it was made by a team that had far more ambition and talent than experience and ended up scaling this project way back when the reality of game development woke them up like a splash of cold water to the face. Which makes sense when I look at the programmer's website and realize he was a college student when he worked on this, and almost certainly so too were the rest. But I'll probably never know for sure because, again, this is literally a 30-year-old pornographic indie game, and I'm not sure how many 50-year-olds want to talk to some foreigner about some Fuda porn they drew when they were younger, although more than one of them did continue to have a career in porn, so it's maybe. So all of this now leads me back into my new question of how the fuck was this made? Not like why, I think I get why now after playing through the entire thing, but actually how? Like, it has to be the best looking game on the entire system. Not like one of them, like it's almost definitely literally the best looking game on the PC-98. And it was some random doujin project thrown together by a bunch of amateurs. How were they all this talented, and why did this not lead to anything bigger? I mean, sure, some of them made games after this, but I don't think anyone besides the composer ended up doing this full time, and none of them are even remotely a big name in any industry. So like, it all comes back to this. This game should not exist. It had a weird amount of professionalism behind it. The talent involved actually doesn't make sense, and it's literally just some completely random fuck-off doujin project put together by a bunch of university students and completely forgotten almost immediately after. This really should not have ended up being the most recognizable game on the PC-98, and it's almost completely unfathomable that that's actually what happened. You know, there was this anime about the PC-98 that aired last year called 16-Bit Sensation, and while I watched it partly because I'm a massive bleeding heart retro gamer, and partly because even after my 3-hour video, I apparently still have to watch literally every new time travel anime that comes out, at the heart of this story was this sense that the PC-98 was an absolute miracle of a system, that anyone, truly anyone, could come in and churn out a massive hit that propelled you to stardom. And that this was something that could only ever happen on the PC-98. And while it took 30 years, it looks like that's exactly what did happen. A bunch of random nobodies came together and, through whatever miracle dust that made up the PC-98, produced some pure, unadulterated magic. And I think that's honestly beautiful. Two last things before we go. One, if you found this video insightful, or at least interesting, you'd be doing me a huge favor by stepping on that like button. And two, if you'd like to know more about the PC-98 and its most famous author, you can check out my 2-hour critique of Kano Hiroyuki's Zenon right here. As always, thank you so much for your time, friends, and I will see you in the next video.